He believed that losing his job was the worst thing that could possibly happen until an unexpected email arrived in his inbox offering him something completely out of the blue. The restaurant was a place of subtle elegance, where the dim ambiance met crisp white linens and the waitstaff glided silently between the tables. Each evening, well-dressed guests conversed over gourmet meals, their laughter mingling with the soft clinking of glasses. For 19-year-old Jason, it was just another shift, a way to get by while balancing college and rent. He wasn't one of those privileged kids. There was no family trust fund, no safety net, just the paycheck he relied on to keep going. He moved through the tables with practiced ease, an empty tray in one hand, scanning the room for the next task. His boss, a man with a constant stern face, always said that the best waiters were those who went unnoticed, fast, efficient, but invisible. Jason didn't mind that. He wasn't trying to draw attention to himself. But then, something unusual happened. At a corner table, a woman fumbled with her clutch, and a sleek object fell to the floor, possibly her phone. It slid underneath the table, and she hesitated, glancing around, unsure if she should pick it up herself. Jason was nearby, clearing another table, and without thinking, he crouched down, picked up the item, and handed it to her. Their eyes met for a brief moment. That's when it hit him. She was Melania Trump. She took the item with a quiet thank you, barely audible, her face unreadable. Jason gave a polite nod and moved on without another thought. It was just a simple act, a reflex, and nothing more. But someone else noticed. From the other side of the room, the manager had been watching. His expression remained neutral, but his body language shifted slightly. He looked toward the kitchen, then back at Jason, before disappearing into his office. Jason didn't know it at the time, but in less than 24 hours, his life was going to take a turn he couldn't have imagined. But that night, he had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. The next day, Jason walked into work, expecting just another tiring shift. He clocked in, tied his apron, and headed toward the back for the usual pre-shift meeting. But before he could get there, his manager, Mr. Calloway, blocked his path. "Jason, in my office now." His tone was cold and firm, not a request but an order. Jason blinked, confused. He had never been late, never missed a shift, and never received any complaints. As he followed Calloway down the hallway, his mind raced, searching for a reason for the summons. When the door to the office shut behind them, Jason knew something was off. Calloway didn't sit, didn't offer him a seat. He just folded his arms and exhaled sharply. "You broke protocol last night," he said. Jason frowned. "What?" Calloway's jaw tightened. "You interacted with a high-profile guest without permission." Jason's stomach lurched. "Are you serious? I just picked something up for her. It took 2 seconds." Calloway shook his head. "That's not the point. We have strict policies for a reason. You're supposed to keep your distance, do your job, not become part of the experience." Jason exhaled, frustration bubbling up. "I wasn't trying to be part of anything. I was just being polite." Calloway didn't waver. "Doesn't matter. She didn't complain, but someone else saw it and reported it. This restaurant serves elite clientele, and the last thing we need is an employee overstepping. We can't take that risk." Jason couldn't believe it. Fired over something so insignificant. He had spent months working double shifts, covering for others, dealing with rude customers and impossible expectations, only to be dismissed over a trivial moment. "You've got to be kidding," he muttered. Calloway's expression remained unmoved. "Turn in your apron. Your final paycheck will be mailed." No second chances, no warning. Jason stood there, his heart pounding in his ears. He wanted to argue, to make Calloway see how absurd this was, but one look at the manager told him it was pointless. He swallowed his frustration, yanked off his apron, and threw it onto the chair. "Fine." He didn't wait for a response, storming out of the office and pushing through the door into the afternoon sun. The world outside didn't care that he had just lost his job. People walked by, cars drove past, and life continued as if nothing had changed. Jason pulled his phone from his pocket and stared at the screen, unsure of what to do next. For the first time in ages, he had no idea where to go from here. Jason sat on the subway, staring blankly at the floor, the clatter of the train barely registering as he replayed the events in his mind. Fired just like that. No warning, no second chance. The worst part? He hadn't done anything wrong. His fingers gripped his phone tightly. He could call his mom, and she would listen, telling him everything happens for a reason. But he wasn't in the mood for that kind of optimism. His dad would probably just say, "Keep your head down, follow the rules." Jason wasn't ready for that conversation. The train jerked to a stop, and he barely noticed until the automated voice called out his station. He stood, moving through the doors and stepping onto the crowded platform. The air smelled of metal and old newspapers, and people rushed past him, heading home, while he stood still, trapped in his own thoughts. Rent was due in 2 weeks, his textbooks for the next semester weren't cheap, and his grocery list in his notes app was filled with items he couldn't afford anymore. His jaw clenched as he walked up the stairs to street level. His apartment wasn't far, a tiny studio with a leaky sink and a window that rattled when the wind blew. It wasn't much, but it was his, and now he had no idea how he was going to keep it. The weight of everything crashed down on him. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through job listings, but none seemed promising. Host, bartender, delivery driver. None paid as well as the restaurant. By the time he reached his apartment, his frustration had melted into exhaustion. He tossed his keys onto the counter, kicked off his shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. Maybe Calloway was right. Maybe he should have ignored the whole thing, just walked past the table. But that wasn't who Jason was. He stared at the ceiling, wondering what to do next. Maybe tomorrow he'd print out his resume and go job hunting in person. But as his phone buzzed, he barely glanced at it, assuming it was just a junk email. Yet something about the subject line caught his eye. Your kindness did not go unnoticed. A chill ran down his spine. He sat up, pulse quickening. It wasn't a name he recognized, and there was no sender information to give him a clue. Just those 6 words. His thumb hovered over the screen, but something told him this email was about to change everything. Jason hesitated before opening it. The message was short and simple. You did something yesterday that most people wouldn't. You helped without expecting anything in return. People like you are rare. If you're open to an opportunity, reply to this email. Jason read it 3 times. His first instinct was to dismiss it as a scam. Who sends random job offers without context? But this wasn't exactly a job offer. There was no company name, no position listed, just a vague reference to what happened at the restaurant. Someone knew what he had done. But who? Could it be Melania Trump herself? No, that didn't make sense. People like her didn't send personal emails. Maybe someone at the restaurant had seen the whole thing and felt bad for him. Or maybe it was a setup. Jason clicked on the sender's email address. It was just a string of random letters and numbers. A red flag. But the message itself didn't read like a scam. No links, no request for personal information. Just an invitation. Jason exhaled sharply, torn between ignoring it and giving in to his curiosity. He typed a quick response. Who is this? Less than a minute later, his phone vibrated with a reply. We'll explain soon. Meet us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Madison Hotel, 14th floor. Jason's heart pounded. No names, no further details. Just a place and a time. Thousands of warning bells went off in his head. He didn't know these people, had no idea what they wanted. But deep down, there was something else. A pull he couldn't ignore. If he walked away, he would always wonder what could have been. The real question was, did he have the courage to show up? Jason barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind replayed the invitation, the risk. By morning, he had convinced himself not to go, a dozen times over. But by noon, he was already pulling on a clean shirt and heading out the door. The Madison Hotel towered above him as he stepped inside. It felt like something out of a movie, an exclusive place where people had drivers and assistants, where no one paid you any attention unless you looked like you belonged. He pressed the button for the 14th floor and waited, trying to calm his nerves. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped into a plush, quiet hallway. Room 1403 was at the end, slightly ajar. He hesitated for a moment, but before he could change his mind, a voice called from inside, "Come in!" His heart raced, but his feet moved forward. Inside the room was sleek and modern, a large window offering a stunning view of the city. At the center of it all sat a man in a dark suit, legs crossed, looking completely at ease. He was in his mid-40s, sharp-featured, with eyes that seemed to take everything in. "Jason," the man said, his voice calm and measured. It wasn't a question. Jason swallowed. "Yeah?" The man gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit." Jason complied, his hands resting in his lap, his fingers twitching slightly as he waited. The man studied him for a moment before speaking again. "You helped someone the other night without hesitation. That caught my attention." Jason's throat tightened. "Who are you?" The man smiled just slightly. "Someone with resources. Someone who believes the right people should be given the right opportunities." It was vague. Too vague. Jason shifted in his seat. "So, what is this? A job offer?" The man nodded. "In a way, it's more than just a job. It's an opportunity." Jason blinked. "What do you mean?" The man leaned forward. "Tell me, Jason, what do you want?" Jason felt his pulse race. He knew what he wanted: stability, security, a way to pay his bills, finish school, and not feel like he was drowning every month. But instead of saying all that, he simply replied, "I want to know why I'm here." The man smiled again, slow and knowing. "You're here because I think you have potential, because you understand something most people don't: how to recognize a moment that matters." He leaned back. "And if you're willing to take a leap, I can offer you something better than just another paycheck." Jason's heart thudded in his chest. He still had no idea what this was about. His palms were damp as he waited, every instinct telling him this moment would change everything. The man in the suit, still unreadable, leaned back in his chair, watching him like a chess player studying the board. "I'm offering you a way out," he said. "A way out of what?" Jason asked. The man smiled. "Out of the cycle you're in. You work hard, but you're stuck. The wrong job, the wrong people controlling your future. One decision, and suddenly you're unemployed. That's not power, Jason. That's survival." Jason clenched his jaw. He didn't like how true that was. "I'm listening," he said carefully. The man nodded. "Good. I run a private organization. We work with people who have potential, people who can recognize opportunities that others miss. We place them in positions where they can grow, learn, and eventually have influence." Jason frowned. "What kind of positions?" The man chuckled. "Nothing illegal, if that's what you're asking. The world is built on relationships, Jason. Power isn't just money, it's access. It's knowing the right people, being in the right places at the right time. You've already proven you have that instinct." Jason shifted in his seat. "Because I picked up someone's phone?" The man met his gaze. "Because you understood that small moments matter. Most people don't." Jason sat back, his mind spinning. "So what exactly are you offering me?" "A start," the man said simply. "A paid position, travel, mentorship, connections, a way into a world most people will never see." Jason stared at him, feeling like this was all too surreal. "Why me?" The man's expression didn't change. "Because people like you don't come around often." Jason felt his heart race as he processed everything. His life wasn't going as planned. He could keep looking for another job, but what if this was the chance he had been waiting for? He took a deep breath, met the man's eyes, and said, "I'm in." The man smiled. It wasn't a broad smile, but it was enough to make Jason realize that whatever this was, it was going to change everything.